4:30, just kind of the initial technology we're going to go over. So I thought I'd record this because I'm going to go through it, probably a little fast. If you need to go back and look it over again, I'll post it in Blackboard. I'll make, under the class notes, I'll make a little link to the MP4 and you can just pull it down and watch it. If you don't need it, that's okay too, right? All right. So we talked about on Tuesday about forming teams, right? I think we're missing a bunch of people because we have a couple squads of 6, and then we've got 5, and 5. So we're missing 3 people. There was some trouble with the trains. There was a fatality in Lombard, so the trains were blocked early this morning. So if they were taking a train, they might be in trouble or something. I had to drive in, just barely got here. So hopefully those 3 join us here because there's a lot of people wanting to get in, and it's kind of disingenuous to not show up to a class, but other people want to show up. So let's hope they're okay and they get here on time. We talked about these documents here. We talked about the projects and the various teams. There's some technology I want to talk about, a whole bunch of technology, that we're going to use throughout this. Now, some of these things you may have heard. If you've been with me in a class before, we've used these. If you haven't, that's okay. One of the main things to keep in mind is none of these technology choices are judgment choices, right? None of it's like, oh, you didn't use this, right? Oh, Professor X taught you that. They're not judgment choices because in the end, technology is just tools. It's tools to get a job done, right? So we have to pick something, right? Because we have to have some standard, right? So I'm going to present a standard that is widely used across. I've got a good knowledge with. I think you being armed with this knowledge will be a definite, massive employment increase, right? Make you more attractive to an employer. But if you come back and say, hey, well, we want to use this, we're comfortable here, okay, we can talk about that. I don't see a reason not to investigate other technologies, and there's no judgment on those other technologies are good or bad, right? But we have to pick a kind of a workflow, how things get done, okay? And you're going to find here what's the driving force in all of these technological choices. There are 2 of them. You may have heard a little bit if you came early and saw that video with Gene Kim I was playing. This book, you hear the term DevOps. You might have heard that term kind of kicked around, right? You hear it a lot. Almost so much that you hear people kind of making jokes about it, right? Like it's, let's DevOps everything, right? It doesn't even make sense, but they kind of say that in kind of jest or sarcastic. But really, the term DevOps, you could look at it as like democracy, right? Democracy is a massive concept that has so many areas, but you kind of know what it is, right? When you lived here, right? You're going to know what it is without being able to fully express every aspect of it. The term DevOps really just takes the term developers and operations and really just gets them together, right? In the past, the operators were exiled, right, to where the servers were in the basement, right? And their job was keep everything running, to the death, right? Keep everything running. Well, the developers your job was get as many features that can make us as much money. And once they were done, they would throw the code, as so to speak, over the wall and be like, hi, we're going out, as the video said, high-fiving each other, right, out for drinks. When the poor operations people were given this like dumpster fire, having to maintain it and fix it, right? So there was this constant conflict, and you saw it not only in crummy software, long lead times, companies that just didn't care. They said, you deal with it, right? We'll fix it next year, right? So you saw not only a financial advantage, meaning like a company that could iterate faster technology changes, could unseat companies. What am I talking about? Well, Netflix. Some of you may not be old enough to remember, but there used to be a company called Blockbuster. Blockbuster was we'd go and rent a video, right? They were worldwide. They had Blockbuster Bowl. They'd sponsor the Super Bowl, right? I remember spending every Friday night, you go to Blockbuster, right? Well, they're out of business. I think the last store finally was in Alaska. They finally closed, right? Completely out of business. Why are they out of business? Netflix was selling the same movies, right? Blockbuster tried and even had a mail service, where you could, before Netflix got the streaming start, they would send you the DVDs in the mail, like a library. You'd watch it, then return it, right? They had a mail service before Netflix, and it completely failed. Why? Because their IT, their infrastructure was so ossified that they couldn't change even if they wanted to. So think about that. Your IT is the vehicle of how you make money. And it's so poorly engineered that you can't change to save your life, right? That's a sinking ship, right? You know, think about what Uber did. Now, you know, all the background about maybe not a good company with good structure and good people, but technologically, what did Uber do to the taxi business, which had been around for hundreds of years and had veritable monopolies on transit? It disrupted it, right? You know, Lyft, right? Disrupted it. Why? Technology enabled them to. They could move, right? So DevOps was born, and that term was born in 2009. It was born out of the pain of, you know, I told you, made the joke about Dilbert, right? Dilbert is real, right? And the inefficiencies and the layers of meetings and the lack of seeing information technology as a benefit, right? And I kind of blame the MBAs. Do we have any business people in here? Minors, MBAs? Anyone wants to admit they're in? Right? So for decades, the MBAs outsourced everything, right? Outsourced it overseas, cheap. Why? Because they saw all the IT people as an expense. All the IT operation is just an expense. Why did they see it as an expense? Because they looked at it and said, you know what, I've got to pay you $50,000 a year. You don't make a single dollar in revenue. I can't track a single dollar to you. Hence, you're an expense. What they failed to realize was every single company is an IT company. And by outsourcing it all, you're essentially putting yourself out of business, right? You're essentially putting yourself out of business, right? So the companies that excelled were the companies that saw IT as their competitive advantage. And that's what this book is full of, the case stories for that. You're going to see various large companies, Nordstrom's and Nike's and the billing company I told you about. And then these are the numbers to back it up. So we want to arm you with those concepts and tools so that you can go into a company and not just be an expense, but now you can say, hey, I can make IT a revenue generator. Revenue generator, how? Come on in. We've got to get into the next one around. Just around the corner. Yeah, this the other remote thing. These are the guys I talked to Lewis about. These guys need a camp out in the other room. They're working on an internship. Anyway, yeah, if you could open that up. Thank you. Sorry about that. Right? So you can say to a company, look, this process takes 4 weeks. It takes you 4 weeks to get your software out. We can help you get that down to 2 weeks or 3 days, right? And you're like, well, that's you know, nuts. That's reckless. Well, Amazon, right, releases code every 12 seconds. Every 12 seconds. Now, whether that's just fixing a typo or putting a new API out, they're putting code out every 12 seconds, and you're competing against that, right? And you might be like, well, they're Amazon. They've got all these people, right? The same principles they use, same rigor they use, you can do it too, right? So the best quote to sum this all up was done by Adrian Cockcroft. He was the architect of Netflix architect, right? Netflix runs entirely on Amazon Web Services. They don't have any physical servers. They just run on the cloud. And Amazon hired Adrian Cockcroft because that was Amazon's largest customer. They just said, come over and be our chief architect. So they stole him. But he was talking to a Fortune 100 CIO, right? Fortune 100 biggest companies in the world. And the Fortune 100 CIO said to him, we can't do what you do at Netflix, right after he gave a presentation. And Adrian, the guy, said, you're right. Because we hired all our people from your company. And we got out of their way and let them do great things, right? So that Fortune 100 company had the talent and just drove them into the ground, right? Drove them into the ground, outsourced them, you know, handcuffed them, right? Kind of waterfall model and outsourced them to death. And they said, you know what, we're going to Netflix. And then Netflix is not just a movie company and making movies, but they're also a leading technology development company, right? They build infrastructure pieces and libraries and modifying FreeBSD, and they contribute this back out to the community, right? You might be like, well, that's Google, that's Microsoft's IBM. No, it's Netflix. You're like, why is a media company doing it, right? Well, they're furthering their dominance by putting their stuff out there, right? So that's what we're trying to enable you here through these processes, right? And of course, it's not going to be magical right away. It's like amazing, millions of dollars, but now you'll be able to go into companies and fit in with this nomenclature, right? Or say at least, oh yeah, I've experienced a little of this. And then they're like, oh great, we don't have to train you in this. Or worse, like we don't have to deprogram you, right? Howdy, come on in. We got a spot here, there's a couple extra chairs floating about. Yeah, you can borrow this chair. All right, so what are we going to do here? Well, we're going to do everything through version control, okay? Some of you have worked with version. How many people have worked with version control in their life here? Anybody not worked with version control? Anybody made it through? You made it through without working with version control? Cool. All right. So obviously Microsoft now owns GitHub, but we're going to use the Git version control, right? GitHub is just a product on top of it. It's a commercial offering on top of Git. Why is Git called Git? It's created by Linus Torvalds, who's the creator of Linux. He's a little bit of a sarcastic jerk. And Git is a British slang term for someone who's really stupid. So he thinks that's funny, and all right, that's the history, right? So it's called Git. So basically, what does version control allow us to do? One, it allows you to not have to email code around, right? Two, it allows you to have a repository, or we call it a repo for short. A repository is a single source of truth. What does that mean? Well, you're like, hey, where's the latest code? It's in the repository. As opposed to, oh, it's on that lady's laptop and she just graduated and moved to Mozambique. Oops, now I gotta go track her down on the beach, or get on a plane, right? Or work for some backup that's 6 months old, right? Or, oh, the code's on my laptop, don't worry. The guy next to me just spilled coffee on my laptop. We just lost all our source code. And you kind of laugh and chuckle, but you think about, for instance, video game companies, right? Think about all the video games that have been made in the last 25 years, and you're like, well, why don't they just put them on an emulator and sell them all for $1? Most of that code they lost. Or somebody's got it in their garage. There was a guy selling it like some old Sierra games. He was a designer, like from a box in his garage, and the lawyer stopped him, right? It just lost because it wasn't in version control. It's on somebody's desktop, right? So we're not going to have that happen. So Git is what's called a distributed version control, right? Because multiple people can participate at the same time. Now, the interesting part happens is, well, what happens if I change this and someone else changes it, and then I submit my change, but that other change now doesn't match because it changed a world that doesn't exist. You now have what's called a merge conflict. And people have spent, computer scientists, so much time trying to solve this problem. The way Git solves it is it just puts brackets around it and says, here, human, here's the problem. You pick which one, right, is accurate. So it kicks it back to the developers to say, figure out which one you want to keep, right? So what we're going to do is all our code, all your documentation, everything is going to have a home in your team's GitHub account, okay? I was able to get GitHub to give us unlimited private repositories a couple years ago, and you'll notice that we made a what's called an organization called Illinois Tech-ITM. And what I have here is, I have last year's projects, which I have to clean out, but basically you're going to form like a team number, right? And we're going to give you a team repository, right? And you're going to push collectively all your code, all your reports, all your diagrams. You're going to update them, your build scripts, everything's going to live in here, right? One source of truth. Now, of course, you'll keep the local repositories on your own system, but your team stuff is going to be here, right? In addition to this, I'm going to, some of you already have these because you've been in classes, but for those who don't, I'm going to create, as you can see right here, based on your Hawk ID, I'm going to create you a private repository because we're going to go through a couple exercises here to get used to Markdown and get used to pushing and pulling code. I've got a little Git tutorial. If you've done this before, well then it's review and it'll take a matter of minutes, right? If you haven't, this is a good time to kind of get into it and then go through it, and it'll make you really strong, right? Make you really strong. So one of the assignments, we're going to ask you to sign up at GitHub. If you've already signed up, you don't have to do this. Whatever username you make is your username. Now you're going to keep it for the rest of your life potentially, so some people, your Hawk ID may not make any sense later in life. But then again, making your, ID, Princess Unikitty, if you're not known as Princess Unikitty on the web, it doesn't help you as well. Then again, some people have very common names, so you might have to get like Joe Smith 37, right, or Joe Smith 38. So kind of think about that. It probably doesn't hurt to have your name in it, because you probably want a resume too. You don't want to say like, butt kicker 99, right? It goes with your resume, something. When you're young, you have those, I think you think it's cool, and then you're like, oh, I'm on the cover of Forbes, and right? It doesn't quite work, right? So I'm going to put a Blackboard grade entry here. It's just going to be like for a point, but I need you to send me your GitHub ID. So what I will do is create the private repository, invite you to it, so that means it's private, you can use it. You're welcome to use it for other classes. For instance, I'll just borrow Tyler here because his stuff's up here. But for instance, we just have students do this. They just make a folder per class and then push all their code up there. Totally, that's your choice. Totally, you should go by what your teacher says. This is totally extra, right? There's no forced, or this is the grassroots. Some people have done this. Hey, that's fine. Whatever you put up here, it only will live until about when you graduate. So after you graduate, if you want to keep it, make sure you put it somewhere else, a public or your own repo, because we'll just close these down and recycle them. In addition, when you send me your GitHub ID, I'm going to invite you to give your team a number, and then invite you all to the team repository. Okay? Invite you to the team repository. So that's very important to get that. It's also very important before we leave today, or at the very end, to make sure you have all your team members set, right? Because if you're switching and swapping, now you're behind because we're already on the clock at the start of the first sprint. So that's what we're going to do here. For a Git tutorial, Codecademy, not Academy, don't type in Codecademy, it goes to a spam site. It's Codecademy, because I like Flickr, one of those things, they drop a ball. Has a really nice 4-part free Git tutorial. It's a little in-browser thing. They say type this, you follow the steps. It'll hit you with the basics, right? They have all kinds of training, so if you're interested in Ruby and JavaScript and Express and Angular, you can obviously sign up and pay. But here, you can sign up for free. This is a free one, and this will be posted in the assignments. There's the 4 parts. Basic Git workflow, how to backtrack, Git branching, Git teamwork. You may not need all of this, but it at least exposes you to the basics and walks you through tutorials. It's really nice, and it gives you a little badge at the end that said, I completed this, right? When you hit sign up, it says you can authenticate with a Google account, so you can just use your Hawk account, right, in a single sign-on. You don't have to make another account, so just click it and then log in with your Hawk account, and then it saves all the account creation stuff. So we're going to walk you through this so you get used to it, because everything's going to be, right, we're going to use this version control, this workflow. Now, there are other tools on top of Git. Git is obviously a command line tool, but we want you to know the basics, because if you get into trouble, with the other higher level tools, we got to go down to the lower level tools as well. So this will explore you. This kind of version control with Git being pretty much, at the moment, technology changes, 5-10 years from now, we don't know, but being pretty much universal on the concept of version control. This is like if you showed me your resume today and you said at the bottom, like, I know Microsoft Office, right? I would say in 2018, well, yeah, everyone can use the basic Office. Like, that's not even a resume piece. If it was 1994, that would be an impressive resume piece, right? Same with this here. Git terminology and usage is now kind of assumed, right? And it's one of those things you don't want to walk into a place and they're going to be like, yeah, so, commit this to the Git branch. And you're like, well, that's a Git branch, right? You don't want to be in that position. So at least this will make you familiar with it. And those in here who are thinking, hey, I'm going to be an auditor, I'm going to be this. It's good to at least know this stuff, right? You can kind of store it because you never know when it's going to come back. So that's what we're going to use. To use this tutorial, you don't need to install anything. This tutorial is all web-based. It's all JavaScript internal, so you don't need any external software. Okay. So let's move on to software then. First of all, there's 2 ways to install software. Of course, you can go to the web page, download executables. You can do that. I'm going to recommend some package managers. Okay. So for those of you, how many people we got are running Windows here? Okay. Windows. How many Mac people we have? Just 1, 2, 3. 3 Macs. Any Linux people? All right. Okay. So in your case, I don't recommend package managers because the software is pre-packaged and package managers are beholden to distros, so they're always old. So everything I'm going to say here, you can ignore. Okay. and I'll show you, and I'll show you what needs to be done on this case. So for those in Windows, there is a software called Chocolatey. And yes, this is a horrible open source pun. Why is it called Chocolatey? Well, because the Microsoft library for doing retrieval over the internet, right? The Linux library is what? It's wget. So the Microsoft one is NuGet. Right? But actually Chocolatey works pretty well, right? And so there's install instructions there, but essentially you see where it says packages. It's really like if you've used apt-get or yum to install, you say Choco install Firefox, Choco install Java 8, Choco install Git, right? And it will handle it. It will put it in your user accounts, right, like a hidden directory, so that there's an uninstall capability. There's also an upgrade capability. And you can install multiple packages at once. It'll get all the dependencies. So this I recommend, one, because it takes care of the path, right? That's often the hard thing. If you download Git, and then, well, Git's not in your path, so you got to go modify your environment variables. This handles that for you. So I use it. I made use of it. You do have to, once you install it, you can only install from an admin console, so you have to right-click. You can do it from PowerShell. Both PowerShells work, PowerShell Core and PowerShell. If you are working on Windows and using PowerShell, I would recommend PowerShell Core. Right, so Microsoft stopped development on PowerShell Core. They stopped development on the stock PowerShell with the .NET platform, and they moved to the .NET Core, the open source one. And PowerShell 6, or called PowerShell Core, is where all future development will take place. You can get the release right from GitHub. It actually now, the PowerShell shell is cross-platform. It works on Linux and Mac and Windows. So you can run the same shell. I'm not going to require you to do that. This is just my preference, right? But we don't want to be running it off of command prompt, right? No, because CMD is not robust enough to handle a lot of the features we need. And you can simply go releases, download. It's an exe. You double-click it, and it looks like this. So you'll notice the default PowerShell, which is still there, but I've got the preview one. It's got a little darker icon for it. If you're on a Mac, there is something called Homebrew. If you know anything about Apple, Apple is anti-GPL3. They completely distrust and do not like any GPL3 software. Well, that means you're now if you're using Bash on a Mac, you're now 2 versions behind. You're stuck on Bash 3. They're up to Bash 5. Why? Because they won't install any GPL version 3 software. But here, Brew is kind of the package manager for Apple. And it works just like Chocolatey. You don't need admin and privileges to install the packages. It keeps like a local copy in your user directory. This is how you can install software like Git, Packer, Vagrant, VirtualBox, right? So you can kind of script up everything you need. The nice thing is too, if you have other preferences, like I like Chrome, I like Chromium, I like Firefox, you can kind of customize a script so that if you get a new system, you can just run it, right, and make it how you like it. I recommend these also because Homebrew handles path, right? It will stick the stuff into your path so you don't have to make adjustments to, bash profile or bash RC, modify some things, environment variables. If you want to or you feel comfortable, by all means, please do. Don't feel like you're constrained here. In the end, whatever works best for you and your methodology, that's what's going to work. Okay? We're not grading you on this. So those are the package managers. So you're going to need to install, obviously, Git. So somehow you can get the Git. Now, Git itself is different from GitHub. GitHub has its own GitHub desktop. I know some classes have used that. If you want to keep using it, that's fine. Just know that they're different. Although GitHub desktop installs Git, so if you have it, you have it. we're going to need some software. We're going to need to take advantage of Git. So a lot of the work we're going to do, of course, is coding, but some of it's not coding, writing reports, right? And since we're working with text and Markdown, what we're going to need are editors, okay? Editors. Now, I know there's a bunch out there, Notepad, Notepad++, EditPad, but these don't have first-class Git integration. So unless you have a really neat workflow, I would recommend against using them in this case. They're good for just text pads and notepads. I'm going to recommend 3 pieces of software here. The first one, which is kind of funny because it's called Atom, right? Atom was created by the GitHub people. Microsoft bought them, so technically now it's a Microsoft product. But Atom is a text editor which has plugins so you can increase the different capabilities. It's got syntax highlighting, and of course from GitHub it's got Git integration first class, right? So some people like Atom, if you've used it. There's another piece of software. Atom's available on all platforms as well. There's another piece of software that I really love that I've moved to using, and you'd be surprised a lot of people in the industry have. It's called Visual Studio Code. Not Visual Studio, Visual Studio Code. Visual Studio Code and Atom are almost identical. It's got light mode, dark mode. It runs cross-platform, right? So you can install it any platform. It's built on Electron.js. I don't know if anyone's familiar with Electron. Same as Slack, right? So it's really just a Chrome browser, headless Chrome browser window. So if you ever wondered why Visual Studio Code or Slack take a whole bunch of memory up, it's really another instance of Chrome running on your system. That's why all your memory disappeared. But you notice they have a really detailed and rich plugin environment for syntax highlighting, Markdown, linters, and all kinds of other tools. Like if you're really crazy, you can have Vim integration, so you can use the VI command sequences to operate it. Right? If you want it, it's there. The other one, if you have a Mac, I'm going to recommend Sublime. Only because Sublime was the original, the one thing missing from the Apple ecosystem was a decent text editor. Sublime came along and fixed that. So Sublime is a very, very good tool. It's been around for a while. As you can see, just visually looking at the 3, they're kind of all the same, right? So Sublime does have Linux and Windows versions you can download as well. It's up to you what you use. The nice part is we're going to use source code. We're going to push it all to Git. That it doesn't actually matter what you use. Right? The workflow is roughly the same. The results are the same. So your team members could have 3 or 4 different choices. It's not going to affect you. So if you want to download them and experiment, if you've got something else, that's okay too. But we just want something that has first class, right, Git integration. Because that's going to help a lot with your workflow where you can stay in one tool and develop, right? Push code, retrieve code without having to switch contexts. Because that switching context is what really gets you, right? Okay. So that's what we're going to need here. Any questions on that? Okay, good. The second piece of software we're going to use, we're going to make use of some software from a company called, I've always said HashiCorp, I think it's HashiCorp, I think the gentleman's half Japanese. HashiCorp was made by a young man, I say young because I think he's about 30, 32. Pretty impressive, young man, fabulously rich now. But he had a problem, much like you and I have right now. He had the problem of wanting to test software, but test it in an environment that it's going to be put out, right? So if I said to you right now, hey, let's take this code I did for, we got a cat picture website. I'm going to hand it to you on a disk, right? Or say it's on a shared drive, whatever. Okay, build me a web infrastructure to deploy this. Right? 'Cause right now, I just hand it to you. What do you got to do? If I just hand it to you right now. I said, here. I had one kid one time said, you 3D printed the save icon? I said, hilarious. And then I told him, I said, hey, wait, kid, the day is coming when your coworkers won't know what this is. Right? What do you got to do? Well, you got to go get some computer. Do you have servers in the server room? Do you have a ticket system you can put in? Do you have a cloud account? All right, well, I've got some servers. how do I get this thing up and running? Well, do I have to install Ubuntu? Do I install Windows? All right, well, it needs PHP. Okay, I got to install PHP. It needs PHP GD, PHP 7, it needs PCLI, and you got to get all this extra stuff, right? And then, okay, well, we need these other tools and this JavaScript library, and now you've spent, 3 days, 4 days, maybe you got to wait 6 months for that hardware to come if you put it in like right was your next budget cycle, right? You just wanted to develop this cat website and make money, right? But you now have this problem of, well, and then if you get it set up like here, say you get it set up at the school, well, when you go home, you're like, I don't have access to the same stuff I have at home or at the school. Well, I got to run it on this other thing here and this older, right? So you're dealing with trying to recreate something, right, in an automated fashion, but you're doing it all manually, right? Now, there is something to be said for experimenting and playing, and that's okay, right? Nothing, you can't eliminate the human completely. But basically, Mitchell came up with a tool called Vagrant. Okay? You may have heard of Vagrant. Vagrant is a lovely tool. I've made use of this in all my classes because it just made life simple. But Vagrant essentially started out as an abstraction layer to VirtualBox. Okay, VirtualBox is a desktop virtualization tool. Some of you might have used VMware Player. Some of our classes I know use it. The nice thing is that VirtualBox and VMware Player now can coexist. So before you had to like uninstall, reinstall, but now you can have them both on a system. VMware Player, unfortunately, if you want to use it for this class, you have to pay $80 because they do not have an open interface, and you have to buy a proprietary plugin from Vagrant. So I recommend VirtualBox because it doesn't cost you $80, but I know some of you are independently wealthy, so I'll leave that. I'll leave that to you. Right, VirtualBox is probably the only thing Oracle has bought that they haven't killed. Right, they haven't like bled slowly. Yeah, and I'm holding back on the list. I think that's candid. I'm holding back. So it works, and they haven't touched it. But Vagrant was designed as essentially an abstraction layer because Mitchell said, look, I just want to say Vagrant up and have the box start, and I want to be able to Vagrant SSH. And I don't want to have to worry about, I'm on an airplane. Oh, there's no network. Well, I got to set up my own private. He said, I just want to get into that box and work. Oh, I've got my own laptop. I'm on a virtual machine. There's no network. Well, I want to do some internal port forwarding so I can have the web page render, but use my own browser to see it. Right? So basically, he set up an abstraction layer, a little bit of Ruby, right? And it lets you do all those things without having to modify the internal VirtualBox. It'll handle all of it, and it does it from a configuration file, which you run, and then the Vagrant executable will parse all of that and turn it into VirtualBox commands. The nice thing is over time, Vagrant has expanded. So if you go to documentation, and this actually works, you can work with, but it works with Hyper-V, right? Directly, so I can control Hyper-V virtual machines, and a couple other places. So it started out exclusively as VirtualBox, and then it morphed since the last 8 years into being an abstraction layer for many virtualization platforms, right? So let me close this down here. Slack messages. The reason we're going to do this is, one, we have all different systems, right? And yes, you can run all this stuff local, but when you're running it in the Mac, and then your person's got Windows, and this person's got a Windows 7, and you're like, well, I installed this library. You're like, well, I had an old library installed. Now all of a sudden you're setting yourself up for problems, because you're like, yeah, it works on my laptop, right? Well, guess what? The customer is not using your laptop, right? So this is part of your team to discuss, well, what's our platform going to be? Now, Vagrant has support for Windows systems. We have to get into some licensing thing. If you're really set on using Windows Server, we can. I would recommend using a Linux distribution. They have some limited support for FreeBSD, so it's probably a Linux biased tool, but there are support for other systems as well. This way you can script out operating system, install, parameters, packages, usernames, passwords, all of it, and then your testing can be done simply on your laptop. So you can build all your infrastructure and take it with you, right? Take it with you. Let me pull this up here. Here we go. This page right here is important too, the why Vagrant, right? Because you might be thinking, well, I'm not a developer, I don't need this. Okay, but everything is code, right? We have everything in version control. So that idea of I'm not a developer, I don't need this doesn't apply here anymore. It's not apt, right? It's like being like, well, you know, I don't need water, I'm not a fish. Of course, that's a ridiculous statement, right? So for the developers, right, their main point is Vagrant will isolate dependencies, right? So your team can build artifacts and say, look, everyone use this pre-built artifact, right? Saves a lot of trouble, right? Operators, IT people, right? If you quickly want to spin up, say, hey, I want to try this cat server on Ubuntu 18, I want to try on Ubuntu 16, I want to try on FreeBSD. Guess what? My own laptop here, I've got about 16 different distributions installed. And I just Vagrant up. Don't want it, Vagrant destroy, right? So it really quickly allows me to, you know, get a base system up and running. And because it's a virtual machine, I have a destroy option where I can just reset it back to kind of the clean install, right? So it makes me a lot more productive than waiting for it to click next. Because once you've done it once, all right, time zone keyboard, I get it, right? I just want to get to the application. Okay, so for designers, UI people, this is important for you because you got to, you know, test everything. You got to check everything, right? I remember hearing a story about, you know, Stack Overflow. They were looking to localize it, you know, where they changed the English to the German, in fact, and they were just going to straight translate it. Well, one of their buttons was like, it wasn't go, but it was like submit, and the German word for submit was like 14 letters, right? Which is traditional German, right? And they only had that much space, and all of a sudden it broke the entire UI, right? Well, you kind of want to know that, especially if you're responsible for that. That's a bug. That's got to be fixed, you know. That goes into the idea of, do we just straight translate everything literally, or do we conceptually translate stuff, right? That could cost money. That's a big decision, right? So designers can quickly throw those latest artifacts up, right? Pull the latest code, see what things look like. They can participate, right? Gone are the days, well, there's one wizard in the team that's on the corner who's got everything, and you have to look over their shoulder, and everyone else is just left out in the dark. We've leveled the playing field. No matter who you are, no matter what job you are, you have all access to the same thing, the same tools, same technology, okay? So we're going to make heavy use of Vagrant, right? And I'll show you a demo here and the instructions about it. Vagrant has a sister tool called Packer. Packer is a tool on, if you can think about it, packing, right? This is how you build machine images. Now Packer has grown up from just being VirtualBox images. They now support, I think, like 20 different cloud and virtualization infrastructure technologies. If we go to the builder section, you can build a Packer box for everything on this list, right? And you start to look at it, the Naver Cloud, right? That's a Korean company. You see Alibaba there, I think, right? There's a Chinese cloud, right? That means people all over the world are using this. Now, when you see Packer in use, you're going to say, oh my goodness, like, this is the most, like, it's kind of ugly how it actually works. And you're thinking, this is what the industry uses? We have a problem because operating systems still are assuming that they're going to go on to PCs. So it's a one-to-one relationship. Like, you've got a PC, you're going to install an operating system. So you make the username and the date and time, right? They're not meant to be automated. So you kind of have to hack around that. So yes, Packer is basically a giant hack to make unintended automated installations. Okay. You can see everything there: VMware, VirtualBox, Triton, right? QEMU, ProfitBricks, Oracle Cloud, OpenStack, 1-in-1, right? LXC, LXD, Docker, DigitalOcean, CloudStack. So the nice thing about Packer is I can set my system up, right? Packer takes essentially whatever you're building, its format. So for instance, we're building VirtualBox, right? So we tell it, I want this time zone, this keyboard, this system name, this hard drive partition, install these packages, clone this code, and it will make that artifact and then export it at the end. We can, after it's done exporting, there is a provisioner section, which I'll show you, which will let you convert that to other formats. So what it does is allow you to have a single standard install, and you can export to multiple formats. So you can test local, push to the cloud. You don't have to worry about different versions, right? Incompatible. Also, if you have your build scripts in GitHub, everyone in the team can just pull it, and you all make sure you're using the same instance, right? So we're going to work most of the virtual machines this semester. We were thinking about containers, but containers require a little bit of leap of, it's a whole other paradigm that we'd have to like cram a container class into this class, and we can't really do that. If you're really interested in containers, Kubernetes, container application orchestration, my friend Junaid Ali, he's going to be one of the guest speakers. He works at OTS here. He's the Kubernetes guru. Him and I are going to be teaching ITMT 495, 585 OS container technology this summer. So if you want to learn more, it's advertisement. We'd love to have you for that. But we're not going to touch it here. If your team wants to experiment with it, that's cool too. But you know, we'll see how that goes. Okay, and of course VirtualBox. So how does this work all together? I have a bunch of sample code here, and I will put all these links up into Blackboard. But on my own personal GitHub page, I keep a Packard repository where I keep everything I ever do. And so these are all the various boxes I've built over the course of 4 or 5 years. And you take a look at them, and you're like, well, I never heard of any of those, or some of those, right? Well, some of these I was just like, yeah, let's Apache Ambari, let's try and compile it. No, it didn't work, out the window. Console, right? Collect D, Docker, Elasticache, Graphite. These are the latest technologies you find on Hacker News, and you're like, oh, I want to see how that works. So I went and built them, right? So I keep a little repository, and you may find yourself building up a little repository too, right? Because you say, hey, I got to do this job, this job, this job, right? Or you might share them between like a company. You notice down here I kept like a vanilla install because sometimes I just want Ubuntu with no packages installed, right? Just the basics, right? I happen to prefer Ubuntu. It goes way, way, way back, me and Red Hat, and gateways, right? Old versions of Red Hat used to just lose their gateways randomly, and you had no connection to the network. This was like Red Hat 3 or 4. And after that, I was like, I'm done with you, Red Hat, like forever. So that's a personal thing there. CentOS, Red Hat, Fedora, they're fine operating systems. I just personally, like you get bit by a dog when you're a kid, and you're a cat person, right? So these happen to be Ubuntu-centric, but there are CentOS install options there as well. So let me do this. So let me show you a little bit of this workflow pushed together here, right? So I'm going to open up Visual Studio Code and close this folder here. And I did a git clone of that repository. The one I showed you on the screen is public, so if you want to clone it, by the way, you can. I'm going to do open folder. Let's see, what's Packer, Vagrant build scripts. All right, so you can see that whole architecture here. Packer has some terminology we have to go over, and when we actually get to the little assignment, we will. But if I open this vanilla install, you're going to see a couple things. You're going to see these JSON files, right? And these are called build templates. And are you ever kind of familiar with JSON? You've heard the term JSON? It's ugly to look at, but essentially it's key value pairs. It's text, but it's key value pairs. Unlike XML, where you have to pay the bracket tax, it's essentially a way to encode textual data with context. So like, there'll be a header builders, and all these values are under builders, right? So you notice there's all these brackets and stuff. The nice thing is something like Visual Studio Code will give you code completion. So if you're missing a bracket, you'll get the red the squiggly underlines. So you get some clues as opposed to using just a straight text editor. But you'll notice that a Packer build template has 3 main sections. A builder section, which is essentially you tell it what you want to build, right? Well, you can from the first 3 lines, you can tell me, like you can tell right away, I want to build a Ubuntu vanilla 1804 server, and I want to make it of type VirtualBox. All right, pretty straightforward. You'll notice all of this in here, and I told you, remember, Packer's kind of ugly. This boot command, quite literally, you'll notice, you're like, wait a minute, why does it say escape, enter, F6? Well, this is literally the key sequence you would type to turn a manual installation into an automated installation. And essentially, Packer just feeds those values in. And that's how you get Packer to work, right? It's ugly, but that's the only way to do it. There really aren't any other solutions than Packer out there. Packer's kind of the only game in town. Yes, Microsoft has like answer files and install. We'll go way back. There was Jumpstart from Sun. You can get into like Kickstart and Precedes, but those don't quite handle the provisioning of the machine. Those just handle automated installation. There are various aspects here of essentially what's going to happen is once the system's installed, it's going to reboot, and then Packer will SSH into the system. That's why you see an SSH timeout, and then it will run any post-install scripts you have. So any customization, you kind of does it there. The nice thing is too, you'll find an ISO URL that it will pull down the media for you. That you don't have to go hunting for have it on your system. If you don't, it'll cache it, and if you don't have it, it'll go get it. The next section is provisioners. Provisioners is where once the main install is done, you can run additional tools. You can run Chef or Puppet or just a plain old shell script and say, by the way, go get Java, go get Tomcat, git clone this code, copy it to this directory. Whatever you want your artifact to have, the provisioner section is where you run it. And you can run it in one giant shell script, or you can cut it up into an array, like 5 or 6 shell scripts, and then space them out. And the final one, post-processor, is where you convert what you have. So we're going to be using Vagrant, right, for managing our VirtualBox ISO. So we're going to convert this VirtualBox ISO into what's called a Vagrant box. When you work with Vagrant, their terminology is box. What box really means is kind of like a VMDK. It's really just a compressed file that has the VMDK and then a little profile file, right? It's like a little zip container. And so what this does is say, don't keep that VirtualBox artifact, right? By default it does. And it says, by the way, convert it to a Vagrant box and then put it into this location where it says output. It goes ... build. So this is a convention I did. By all means, you don't have to follow this convention, but I made a directory called build, which is up a level. And then, of course, the things with double brackets are built in. They're built into the system. So this will give you a unique name, right? Always, because the timestamp is an epoch. One thing that Packer doesn't do, that may at first make you angry, it will never give you a broken build. So if anything fails in any part of the process, it will stop and delete everything it's built. So if your provisioner shell script has a typo, even if it's on the last line, right? So it makes sure it only gives you working artifacts. So sometimes if it took 20 minutes to build and the last thing fails, you might have to go through that cycle a few times. But at least that, or also if it won't overwrite, if you name the file the same thing, it won't overwrite it, right? It'll give you just one file. So let me show you how this works here. I'm going to go into my documents, Packer. Make this bigger here. Let's go CD. I'm going to go into the vanilla install directory. And I've got a bunch of them in here, but let's just pick out the regular vanilla 18. I'm going to have you build this one, right? The first one. And to start building, I've already installed Packer. I used Chocolatey, just Choco install Packer, right? It takes care of everything. So I'm just going to say Packer build the template, right? That's all you got to do. So when I hit a button here, I might get an error here because when I reset the system, let's see. All right, so you see the output happening. And take a look at my, right there, look what happened on my taskbar. Look what popped open. Right? See the little Ubuntu icon, right? No hands, right? Look, no hands, right? What you're going to see here, and by the way, my kids like this. right? Because they think it's magic. See, remember I showed you that boot command, right? This is literally hitting it, escape, F1, F2, F6, and then as if you were typing this in manually, it's passing it over. And then the install is going to continue unabated. And you'll just see all the meters and the lines go, right? And then it'll restart, it will do that provisioning script, do a little customization, and then you'll see a little export on the screen. Whole thing probably takes, I don't know, 10, 11 minutes. So now backtrack and think about that example I gave you earlier with the cat pictures versus this. 11 minutes, you're up and running. Maybe 15 if the network's slow, right? What was your estimation previously? Well, months, weeks, days, right? We just sharpen your development time where you're focusing on, right, development as opposed to hunting things down, right? So you can see this going as well. Vagrant's kind of nice. If I'm going to jump back to Vagrant, if you notice on their main page, there was this boxes, find boxes. So I wouldn't do this in production because ultimately you quote unquote don't know, but people have contributed, especially the companies, will contribute pre-made Vagrant boxes. So for instance, the fourth one down, you see CentOS, put one out, the latest CentOS one. So you can just get that, right? Vagrant init CentOS/7, Vagrant up, it will go automatically download it from the Vagrant store. You're up and running in whatever it takes to download, maybe 4 or 5 minutes. So if you need to test something really quick, right? So I tend to do this with Ubuntu versions. I actually keep an Ubuntu box just handy because there's always things I need, right? Right? You always want to test something. So I'm going to go into my build directory, and you'll notice I've got this Xenial 64 here, right? Also, there's Bionic, right? Bionic is 1804. I got a CentOS here. And I can show you what I have by doing a Vagrant box list. You'll see what I have handy. It takes a minute. It's a query. Right. So you can see I got a bunch of systems there. But if I wanted to go into that Xenial directory, right? There's my Vagrant file. What I would simply do is just say Vagrant up. Right? And you're going to see it start booting, right? Now the thing is it starts headless, so you won't see a VirtualBox icon on the bottom pop up. If you want to see it, you can turn that to true, right? Right? You see it now start to go through, basically this is abstraction. It gives me an error message there. It says, hey, what network? Because sometimes you're on wireless, sometimes you're on wired, so it needs to know what network you're connecting to. If you were doing this in VirtualBox, you would have to modify that manually, right? This just takes care of it for you. So I'm just going to go to the wireless. That's 1, right? Okay, it says booting VM, right? Now, what Vagrant does as well, you notice that line below the 127, it does with public-private key authentication. So people are like, what's the password? I don't know. I mean, the password is actually buried somewhere in a conf file, but it gets rid of that and says, you know what? It's going to generate a pair, insert that in, so now you don't have to worry about authentication, right? Because you're just testing out here, right? You're not worried about passwords and setting up passwords, right? Sometimes it takes a minute to connect here if the boot's slow, especially when I'm running the other thing down there. So Vagrant Lightpacker is also, by the way, brute forcing. It's just SSH, SSH, SSH until it's ready to answer, right? And then when it pops back up, it'll say, all right, you can log in. So sometimes this takes a minute if the system's slow. How would you get a box like that? Well, let me show you here. We can pick a couple here. This is an old Ubuntu, but let's just pick this. Just pick this. Okay. So this syntax of Ubuntu/trusty, the Vagrant boxes always have a two-part. They have a company name and then what's the distribution's name, right? If it's made by Ubuntu, it'll say Ubuntu, but it could be like Joe Schmo, right? Just people put their own stuff up there. So if I come back here, with that, keep going here. Right? Skill, CD, documents, hacker, build. I'm going to do a make directory. This is just my convention. I make directories for each box I have. It makes sense. You don't have to do this, but figure out some system so that you're not confused by your own data storage, right? So I'm going to go make your trusty. All right. So what I need to do is first run this command called init. Vagrant init will create a basic, what's called a Vagrant file, capital V. That's basically the abstraction, the configuration that's sent to VirtualBox, right? So I would simply say Vagrant init, right? And I would paste the name Ubuntu Trusty 64. Okay. So what's going to happen? Well, not much, right? I do an ls. It just says, oops. I got to move this into the directory I made. Make sure you SSH in, or you CD into the directory that you created here. So let's try this again. All right. So CD trusty. We'll go vagrant init. Right. So the first step is init, initialize, right? It's going to make what's called a Vagrant file. You can see right here, Vagrant file, right? What's in the Vagrant file? By the way, you're using Chocolatey, you can get a copy of Vim for Windows, right? Because everyone's Vim, a lot of Vim people here. Oh, they're all Emacs then, huh? Nano? You got some Nano people? People are like, well, what's that one cartoon? I use Cat, I use Ed, I use the magnetized needle, right? And the butterfly wings. It's XKCD cartoon. You can look it up, like Vim elitists. Anyway, yeah, I'm hooked on Vim, but let's take a look at it. Vagrant file. You'll notice that this template is commented out. Like everything's commented out except what's required. Basically, this little box entry says, "Hey, what am I going to modify?" Okay. And how do I start this? Well, I would simply do vagrant up. And what it's going to do is it's going to look for that box, and it's going to say, oh, it's not here, let me go get it. It'll pull it down for me. So the first time it's going to take a little bit to install. After that, I'm going to have it forever. I'm not sure why this one's not going. Let me just cancel that. Right, so we'll let that pull down. And you can see here, this is completing, going along the way here. Why is this important? Well, because there are other aspects here that we're glossing over, for instance, secrets, right? Part of your project's going to require data stores, right? Maybe you're going to have OAuth tokens, right? Things that you don't want to put in your version control because they're secrets, right? Someone could make that mistake, push that code out, it's publicly available, you don't want to give away all those secrets, right? So you're going to need a methodology for inserting secrets dynamically at runtime. You're also going to need to make sure that everybody always has the same code, right? Has the ability to build the same system, right? You would be so surprised how much that changes your ability to be productive. Because what it prevents is one person from taking over the whole project and just running away with it. And then the rest of you just sit there waiting for that person, like from Mount Olympus, to dictate something to you at the last minute, right? Now everyone in their different jobs has equal opportunities because you can say, hey, look, there's a bug over here, so I don't see it. So pull up your Vagrant boxes, right? Oh, there's the bug. Okay, let's go fix it, right? Also, this reduces the need for making requests, requesting servers. I know we have an amazing technology team here that would love nothing but to give you each 6 or 7 servers themselves and then wait on you hand and foot every day. But you know, it costs a lot of money, right? This gets that out of the way, right, and puts this kind of into your hands, right? And okay, so this is about going here. You'll notice this is going here as well. So the trustee is up here. And then let's see. Let me pull up my last notes. Okay. So that's technology and infrastructure. Okay, I'm going to give you a couple tasks to do with all these, and I'll talk about those right before we finish. There's going to be some basic intro, hello world, go through all this stuff. You know, take a couple days to kind of get into it, get into the pool. You know, maybe help your teammates as well. If someone's struggling, you can help them out. for the project, we're going to have to use some project management tools, right? Now, there are various project management tools out there. I believe everyone here has taken project management, right? We've had various different teachers teach it over the years. So I know Dan, Professor Kahn, did anyone take it with Professor Kahn? He just started it, you took it with him. And then that was Miss Harper, I think Kathy Harper, yeah, Harper. And then before her was, I don't remember. It switches a lot because people get, go to work and come in and out, right? So there's all kinds of methodologies and tools and everything. And a lot of the project management you learn was not necessarily software project management, it was more like managing projects. One tool that I found works really well is called Trello. Right? Trello was started by the sister company of Stack Overflow, Fogbugs, and then was spun out on its own, and then it got purchased by Atlassian for $500 million. Trello is essentially, you've probably done this like in iPros or other classes where you take the sticky notes and you put them on the board, right? And then you move them as the task progresses, right? It's called a Kanban or Kanban, it's a Japanese word, how you pronounce it. It means basically billboard, right? The terminology came from the manufacturing industry where in a plant, when you're building something, you want to be able to look at one thing and right away know the state of the entire factory. How many jobs are piling up at this station? Do we need to reassign more people? Are we behind on orders? Why are we behind? Where are the bottlenecks, right? And what it does is it makes work visible, okay? Now, some people have come back to me and said, oh, you're going to use this to pin me down and embarrass me and make fun of me. And we said, no. If we look at this board, and you've got 6 tasks attached to you, and everyone else's tasks are done, that's not your fault. That's you, the project manager, just saying, hey, let's reassign some of the work from this person. Let's bring some other people over and help. Or reevaluate, why does this person have 6 tasks and everyone has none, right? So it's not a punishment tool. Some people like to hide what they're doing. One, so they can get away with stuff. I don't think that's the case here. 2, we're not out to say, well, this person's more efficient than you and they're better at this. It's meant to make work visible so you can swarm to the problem, the bottleneck, and fix it, right? Edward Deming, the gentleman who wrote Out of the Crisis, who kind of led everyone's familiar with the term lean, or the Toyota production system, right? So where did the Japanese get lean from? They got it from Edward Deming. Edward Deming was the guy in charge of all the resources for American factories during World War II. He was responsible to make sure everything got where it should be, everything kept running great. He was so efficient at his job, as they say, they don't fire you, they promote you. They exiled him to Japan to run the Japanese census. Well, after the war, the Japanese infrastructure was completely destroyed, right? And the Japanese, now this is a Japanese quote, please don't credit me, this was said by Mr. Toyota and the families of Kawasaki. He said, we have 5 years to get this is 1945, to get our manufacturing capability back to up to Western European standards, or we will end up like China and Vietnam. He meant that at that time those countries were mostly agrarian and rural. Okay, that's his quote, not mine. You can send him letters. So they had 5 years to rebuild it, and basically Deming taught them, all of them. He actually got an award from the emperor, and so he put what became the Toyota production system into their minds. Japanese, of course, the 70s and 80s, right? Manufacturing excellence, right? American quality goes into tubes, right? So I was born during the oil embargo, right? And then the economic crisis in the Carter administration into the Reagan administration. He finally brought him back in 1985. They brought him back from exile. His response was, he was a very colorful gentleman, but he said, about darn time. But his point was, you cannot continue producing as you produced from the Henry Ford and the Taylor, if anyone knows about Taylorism, and Bethlehem Steel, and optimizing the time processes, right? They built this system where lean is just the American version of the Toyota production system, so they don't have to pay royalties because the name is trademarked. If you use it, you have to pay money to them. But it's the idea of small batch development. The problem was, manufacturing had gotten this idea of scale. If we make 50,000 at a time, we'll save 10 cents a piece, and then times 50,000, we save all this money. Well, the problem is you now have to store all that. You know, you have this all in a factory, a warehouse somewhere. You don't need it all, so you thought you saved money, but you actually didn't. In fact, you wasted time and made an inefficiency, right? So he reduced it to say, look, focus on small batches. Why? Because if we make a small batch and they're all bad, guess what? We have a very quick feedback piece. If we make 50,000 and we find out 3 weeks later they're all bad, we can't stop midstream, right? When you look at software, software is the same way. If you're like, we'll go build the entire content management system and we'll spend, 8 months and, we'll hire all these consultants, and at the end, healthcare.gov, right? That should never have happened. Now, by some weird reason, it was a Canadian company that built it. I don't know how the Canadians got an American government contract, so you could blame Canada. But that never should have not worked right out of the bat, right? Because they should have been iterating in small pieces, should have been expecting it, should have been able to handle that surge of people. It never should have, politics aside, the technology never should have blown up like it did. That day one, first month, it took them 6 months, people before Congress. That never should have happened, right? So Trello is a tool that essentially, learning from manufacturing 100 years, puts it into now a digital format, right? Pretty simple. To do, doing, and done. You have 3 columns. And they're little cards where you as the project manager can just break down tasks and say, you're going to do this, you do this, you do this, you do this, and then people move the cards as you go. And you use the cards to manage and say, oh, we seem to be stuck at this point. And then at that point you say, all right, everybody swarm this, let's finish this, let's solve this problem. Because the other thing Deming said is optimization anywhere other than the bottleneck is an illusion and most likely a waste, right? So if you have some constraint that's preventing you from producing, and you're over here optimizing this, you think like, oh, we're making progress. It's an illusion of work, because you're not, because that's not the problem. And at worst, it's a waste. So I'm going to recommend Trello. It's very simple. Now it has a lot more capacity in it, where you can set due dates and you can tag people with various colors, and you can have a chat on there. There's integration with GitHub, so now GitHub issues you can set up an integration that will automatically appear as a task, or you can just leave it as to do, doing, and done. But this is how your project manager team in the first weeks and all the weeks are going to set up and say, what are our goals? All right, who's going to take those tasks? And you're going to line them up here, right? Now, the trick with this is tasks need to be atomic, okay? So if you write get web server running, bad task, right? That's not a good task, because when is that task done? The end. Well, never, right? Because you're constantly, but if it says, create index.html, all right, that's very quantifiable. Like, I know it, I can say, is index.html created? No, it's not. Task not done, right? So you want to atomize it, like break it down, right? It takes a little bit to get used to that, because we're used to like do the stuff, right? Finish, right? But you really need to break it so that you can know how far along is somebody, right? Basecamp includes these kind of things. If people want to use Basecamp, let me know. I'm going to assume Trello default. If there's another piece of software, come see me. What I'm going to do is, once your team is solidified and put into the discussion board, I'm going to invite you to a Trello board so I can see everybody's together, so I can kind of overlap and manage in case there's a problem. Or when we come through the reports, I'll ask you questions, right? So that you can use your Hawk account, and it'll log you in automatically. I'll send you an invitation to it. If your group wants to use something else, then just let me know. We can set that up as well. You don't need to sign up here. When I send you the invite with your Hawk account, you can do it. The other piece of software we're going to use, we're going to use Slack. Slack has its problems, right? It has its, good things and bad things. Slack is a communication application for work. It's not a chat. It's not AOL Instant Messenger. It's not Skype. It's not Facebook Messenger. It's not Discord. It's meant to work with the concept of channels, right? So the idea is there's groups of people that need to communicate. And it's got like a first-class search built in, but it also has integration with Trello, GitHub, and other pieces of software, so you can kind of streamline work together. We're going to use this as opposed to email. We're not using email for communication. And the reason why we're going to use Slack, and in this case, your team will create a Slack channel, and then I'm going to give you my email, and you just invite me to it, right, just so I can see it. But I want you to get used to working over Slack, because a lot of companies work distributed. You're going to have, people stay at home, people who work at home, companies close their office, have their own room. GitHub itself has employees in 80 countries. They have a small, like 20-person office. The other 200 employees work all remote, right? And GitHub does it, right? Because we have a little bit of time on Thursday morning, right? We're all here, but I know the rest of you are taking a lot of, 4 or 5, maybe even 6 classes. Some taking more. You're close to graduating. You're taking some grad classes. Some of you live far in the suburbs. Some of you live on campus. Some of you might be working. Some of you are night owls. Some of you are morning people. So what's going to happen is you're never really going to be able to get together. But that's not an excuse. I had a team try that one year. They were like, we just can't meet, so we're not going to turn anything in. And it's just like, teacher, I don't believe my religion is against quizzes. Like, it doesn't work like that, right?
Logic.
I understand that this isn't a job, it's not a development shop, so I don't expect you 40 hours, you're all going to get fired, right? But, in a class you have to participate, there's work. So what you're going to be doing is working a lot of out of band, okay? So because you've project managed this and you set up the goals, a lot of you can work independently. Okay, I got to go set this up, I got to configure this, I got to draw the sketches. You don't need to all be together, but where you can communicate is through Slack, where you can ask a question back. Say, hey, did we decide this was blue or green? And sometimes the person you message won't get back to you maybe in 6 hours or 8 hours or the next day, but you'll have that conversation track, right? And you want to keep it on email too, because email is not really a conversation tool, right? And so this allows your team with 5, 6 people working and living all over the place to actually get work done. It will be out of band, right? But that's a little bit of this training that you kind of get used to work out of band and not in email. So we're going to ask you to use Slack in this case. Microsoft Teams is a competitor to Slack. It's different than Skype. I think we can get access to it, so if you really, really wanted to use it, you could. Otherwise, Slack is kind of a huge industry company. And going to a lot of companies will use this by default as well. Slack has all kinds of other plugins as well that you can bring information all together. So Slack would definitely be in there too. Okay, great. One last thing here. Well, we're up at 11 o'clock. Any questions? So we actually got through this faster than I thought. Any comments, questions? All right, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to post this in Blackboard. And so there's going to be like 4 little mini assignments. 1, we want you to sign up at GitHub if you're not signed up. If you are, just give me your GitHub ID. 2, I remember one more thing, Markdown. We're going to have you go through and install these softwares, right, that I listed here. You need an editor, right? You need Vagrant, Packer, and VirtualBox, right? And if you want to use Chocolate or Brew, you can. If you're on Linux, don't use the package managers. Go to the actual website, and they have the executables. They're self-contained executables. If you're on Linux, just download the executable, and then you got to put it in like user local bin, so it's in your path, or adjust your path. Same with Packer, it comes in a zip, but they're just single executables.
I have some of them.
Bingo. All right, so no problem there. But for anyone else who wants to do this on Linux, just know that don't do an app yet because they're years old and it's been abandoned. So HashiCorp doesn't package stuff up. So you're going to need Packer, you're going to need Vagrant. Okay. If you go to Vagrant's website, under the Getting Started, they have a tutorial, Getting Started. I'm going to ask you to go through this tutorial. The one section you can skip, go ahead, Abdullah's got to leave, he's got a dentist appointment. The one thing you can skip is the share section. The sharing section is they have a thing where you can sign up for a Vagrant account and you can store things for your company and stuff. we don't need to worry about that. But I'm going to ask you to go through this, right? I'm going to ask you to go through all of this so you get used to their tutorial stuff, right? Granted, their tutorial's a little bit out of date because they're using Ubuntu Precise, and so we're on B, the alphabet is wrapped, and that was P, so it's kind of like 2012. Needs a little updating, but it'll still function. I want you to do that so you can get used to all the different configuring the networkings and the different options here as well. For Packer, I want you to go through a Packer demo where I'm going to ask you to clone all of my source code, and you'll notice, by the way, my Ubuntu's not there in the bottom. And you see right here, you see it says finished, right? And when I do a build, and I do an ls, you'll notice at the very bottom you see that Ubuntu vanilla box, right? So I want you to build what I just built, and so you can get to this point, and then I want you to add the box to Vagrant manually, so you can Vagrant up that vanilla Packer box you just built. Okay? So I've got some tutorials for that as well, like personal ones where I've taken the tutorials and pushed them together, right? We're going to ask you to do that. The third thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make you if you don't already have it, I'm going to make you a private GitHub account with your Hawk ID through the Illinois Tech group, and I'm going to ask you to make a little introduction, right? So I introduced myself the first day. We have so many people we can't really go through and introduce them. But I'm going to ask you to, so for instance, you can borrow mine if you want to. So it's just Illinois Tech ITM Jay Hajek. But I'm going to ask you to create a README MD in the root, right? So you may have separate folders for other stuff, but in the root. And in the README MD, I'm going to ask you to do a couple things. One, put your name. You've seen my face more than you probably need to, so I put a picture of my kids, right? But I don't, put a picture of you just so it helps me put name to face as well. This is going to help. You're going to have to upload an image. You're going to have to link the image, right? And I'm going to give you a shortcut to Markdown syntax if you haven't done it, right? Below that picture, just getting to know you kind of thing. Put a picture of something that represents you, right? Right? So you like soccer stuff. Right, so I put this picture here. No, it doesn't mean I like anime. There's a longer story. We're both short. It's kind of a, anyway. You can tell actually this is the Smart Tech Lab patron saint, right? Yeah, right. They were 20 years ahead of us, right? But put a picture there. Obviously, make sure it's tasteful, but of something that represents you or something you like. Just give us a simple. Where are you from? Obviously from Chicago, say I'm from the north side, south side, I'm from China, what part of China. Just tell us IT interest, what are you interested in, what kind of background do you have, or what do you want to learn, right? And then just tell us something interesting about you. I played football in college, right, that kind of stuff. And then we're going to have you go through that Git tutorial as well, and at the end of the Git tutorial you're going to get a little badge. Little congratulations badge. They change so it won't look exactly like this. And then you got to just post it in there. So what that's going to do is reinforce the software install, get you used to the nomenclature, get you used to Markdown, get you used to pushing and pulling code, right? And then it shows you completed it, right? So I'm going to type all these up under deliverables, under Blackboard. If you have any questions as well, we're going to make a little discussion board panel, so you've got a question, and some of this is new, throw it in the discussion board so that way other people can see it. That way maybe everyone has the same question. Because if you email me, I get a lot of email and I don't get back to you, so we'll put it there because maybe another classmate might have the answer and you can go ahead and answer it, right?
When is this due?
Well, good question. When is this due? So we'll give you a week to get it done, right? We want to push it through only because, one, at the beginning of the semester, generally there's not a lot to do in other classes, a lot of syllabi and stuff like that. Two, if there's any huge problems, like my computer's broken or VirtualBox won't install, we can get it done right away. Because if these linger, then we'll start missing stuff and missing goals and people won't get assignments. So it is a lot right at the beginning, but I want to get everyone up to a certain level so that we can then go forward from that. Okay? And last thing I'll mention, we're done a little early because I got to run to the Stewart building. My next class is at 11:25. One thing I do want to enforce, not enforce, but just mention here, we are all of different experience levels. Some of us are older, some of us are younger, some of us have been programming, some of us are other focuses. You know, and you might turn to your neighbor or turn to another team, and they're doing all this stuff over here in Express and Angular, and you're like, oh wow, but there's something wrong with me. I want to caution you, it's like going to the health club at the gym, right? You walk into the gym, and there's some Olympic, you know, weightlifter there, 300 pounds. And unless you've trained to get up to that, and when I was in high school, I trained that kind of stuff. If you just try and lift that much weight, you can hurt yourself. You can kill yourself, right? And you may not want to be like an Olympic weightlifter. You're like, I just want to walk on the track and, you know, cardio, right? So go at your own pace. And don't feel that, oh, I'm the last person out of the room, or, oh, everyone else got that, but not me. It's okay, because we're here to learn. You know, if you knew everything, you wouldn't be here, right? You'd be off with Google working something, right? And you may say, like, oh, the professor knows all this. Like I said, I'm at least 20 years older than you. You'd hope I would know a little bit more, right? When you're my age, I hope you're smarter than me, right? That's my goal, right? So go at your own pace, right? Go at your own pace, because we want you to learn, because in the end it's your money, your time, your degree. We want you to feel comfortable. And yeah, you might not master all of this, but that's okay. We want to get you exposed to it, right? So don't feel, you know, it's a race or a competition. Just do what you can do. And in the end, have fun, right? If you're not having fun, then what's the point, right? Okay, so with that, any questions? All right. This lab will be open, meaning like if you wanted to stay and talk. Oh, sorry, one more thing. You need to finalize your team members, and make sure you put that in the discussion board section where I have your, because I got to make like the team names and the repository. So you need to trade people. You may want to talk to your team members about roles. We've got extra time. I've got to go to the next class, but if you want to hang out here a little bit, there's not a class in here again until 1:50. The only thing I ask is whoever's the last person out, just close the door. The lights will turn themselves off because of the occupancy, but you know, today you can hang out, and usually most classes you can hang out beyond that. I just have to skedaddle it right away to get to the north side of campus. Okay? All right, good. So please get those teams on the discussion board, and I will get all those deliverables posted, and we'll go from there.
Thanks for showing the chocolate. The one reason I love it,
I think the guy who created it lives in Chicago. I heard him on his highway. Gained popularity. Probably been around since 20. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And yeah, when I found out about it, I just started doing it. Like, yeah.
Because I asked.
So, yeah, guys in
The
Chicago
guy that was at the
created
service,
it.
they're not anymore, so I can't really.
Yeah, he started doing it for himself, and then just
Now $750 for front. No, $800 for front, $750. I get all the parts for
You have a shop there?
Or am I
yeah.
You want it in the summer? Or?
we have 4 people.
probably have to split up.
I think
Are you guys? So if I heard
Come back.
I already did my
yeah, so it's
That's why I'm
Right, Thursday.
I have to be using WhatsApp, bro. What is this? How do you get a...
No, I think it's just because together with the number and then we can have
Seems like they
anyone can
Maybe we can have classes, I'm back here at 4:50 to 3:30, and then there's another class at night. Maybe we'll adjust the tower on.
So you have WhatsApp?
Yeah. I'll let them know that.
I know. You said the first line is 20 pages. Listen, I don't know if I like skip through the lecture video accidentally, but they're all screenshots of it. No, the first line is just like a hello video.
20 pages, bro?
Wait for what? That's not discussion. I don't know, you got 20 pages left.
No, I don't know. I skipped through.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've already got everyone's created, and once you give me your ID,
I'm gonna drag it out.
I'm gonna make a blackboard assignment post, and then that way,
So I put my number in the word.
give me a little bit of time to do that. And I'm glad you're on that. You're headed through all project. Yeah.
You guys were? That's awesome. Nice book, man. What was your name?
We handed out day one. We handed out the paper. All right, then they're on
Fourth years, I'm guessing?
Blackboard. And you'll see it says like job description.
Do you have WhatsApp?
I don't, but I can just.
Yeah, pull down.
Yeah, whenever you get a chance to download it, I'll just type it.
Okay.
It's on Blackboard. I just don't use three documents that list the job description and the 6 those examples.
So we don't really. Production means, right? We're just gonna do.
No, I think it's just a delay.
And you can start from there.
Setting up.
No, I'm going to invite you. Your team's going to make the Slack account and then invite you right
And then whenever you get it, I'll text you.
Yeah.
Whenever you get a chance, just text me back.
Cool.
Does he for sure want us to use? I don't know what programs he wants us to use. Like, I don't know which ones he's requiring.
For us.
He wants us to use Packer. Because that's how we can run our
And some other team.
He said Packer.
Well, the sooner you do, the sooner you can start saying, all right, you're a project manager, you want this,
that's how he wants us to
breaking it down. As long as it's late, that's how you have to do it. So, to your advantage to go as soon as possible. But I'll leave it up to you.
Pretty straightforward. Yeah, I haven't used it, but I'm hoping it's simple because then it would kind of defeat the purpose if it wasn't simple.
The baseline, and then minus 13 points. So if you want to create your own, it has to be a comparable work. Kind of make
So we're driving there.
It's gonna take longer to warm up the car.
I want to drive across the
Yeah. No, not even across. EG. Engineering.
Oh, you want? Yeah.
EG.
EG.
Our class is called EG.
Did you just?
Yeah,
I got that just.
Is your team missing a person?
We're missing
No.
3.
You're missing 3 people? You can't. It's 6 is the limit.
2. Sorry.
So much for that, right? 2. Are they okay? Like, they're sick. One of them and one
Oh, no, yeah. You're not
one of them is
coming. All right. Well,
we have them.
you got to communicate with them because that's not. We've got everything's online, so you know overseas. There's no excuse, right? All right. Cool.
No, I
It's gonna say team.
It was Matt, right?
Yeah.
I don't think you said it.
Do you add by?
It should automatically pop up.
So weird.
You just set up like your phone number.
Yeah. If you want to double check in contacts, I think I put that in. Maybe I messed that one up.
8477.
don't know if it matters with the area code. That can ruin the one.
Oh yeah, I gotta add. We gotta add.
You know, I'm just gonna send it.
Okay.
Did you do it already?
No.
No, did you add us to Slack?
Yes.
You get it?
Yeah. Scott, did you already get it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do we have to come up with an idea like this week, or is it more doing it later?
No. So
So now we have
I have an idea. It's like something I do at work. But I don't know if you guys want to do it. We can. I talked to him already about it. He said
Yeah, I made a team drive too.
I'm not for
Because I'm
really
like
whatever
that.
we want to do.
It's
No, I made one too. And
so
I-
basically Rocket Chat
No.
Messenger.
Sorry.
I was the only member.
My manager wants us to create an app that has LAN Messenger in it, screen sharing, and one other thing.
It's kind of like TeamViewer.
LAN Messenger, screen sharing.